Arya Stark stood at the edge of the scorched red keep, ash falling around her like snow. The stench of charred flesh curled in her nose. King's Landing no longer lived, it smoldered. The people Daenerys had promised to free lay scattered like discarded dolls, broken and lifeless. And yet, Arya stayed. She had come to kill Daenerys. That was the truth no one had to say out loud. She had ridden through the firestorm, past the dead, with needle hidden beneath her leathers and a plan shaped by vengeance. But when the smoke had cleared and she looked upon the silver-haired queen, there was something else, a quiet recognition. Not approval, not forgiveness, but understanding. Arya knew what it was like to carry the weight of so many names. She knew what it meant to have a list and make it your life's purpose. Daenerys, eyes still glazed with the heat of dragonfire, had turned to Arya with no fear. She had not flinched when Arya stepped close enough to strike. Instead, she had whispered, "You know what it means to serve justice, don't you, girl?" And Arya had not said no. Weeks passed, and Daenerys named her the Queen's Justice. Arya didn't ask what that meant. She already knew. It meant no trials, no mercy, no public display of law. Just cold silence in the dark. The things a queen could not be seen doing, Arya would do that. She wore no sigil, no armor, just a black cloak and a dagger of Valyrian steel. To the people of Westeros, she became a ghost, a whisper, a shadow that came for the ones who disobeyed the Dragon Queen. They called her the Black Wolf, and mothers began telling their children not to speak against the crown, lest the wolf come for them in the night. Arya told herself it was for the realm, that she was killing bad men, that Daenerys, though cruel, was building a better world. The old world had taken her father, her mother, her brother. If fire was what it took to destroy that world, then maybe Daenerys was right. Maybe fire was justice. But the names began to change. It started with a lord who hoarded food from starving villagers. Arya slit his throat in the snow. She didn't regret it. Then a Septon who spoke too loudly about Daenerys' wrath. He died in his sleep, smothered with his own robes. Then a girl, just 15, who had painted the words Queen of Ashes on a wall. Arya watched her hanged by Daenerys' guards. That time, Arya did nothing. But something inside her turned. She started seeing Sansa's face in the firelight. Jon's voice haunted her, telling her this wasn't the justice their father believed in. But Arya had never believed in mercy. Not since the day her sword first tasted blood. One night, she stood in front of a mirror, staring at herself. She touched her own face, wondering who it really belonged to now. Arya Stark of Winterfell? Or someone far colder, far older? Daenerys summoned her soon after. Another mission. Another name. This time it was Tyrion-Lannister. That was the moment something cracked. Arya didn't flinch when Daenerys gave the order. She didn't cry. But her silence said more than any protest. The Queen noticed. "He betrayed me," Daenerys said coldly, brushing her fingers along Drogon's scales. "You know what that means?" Arya nodded. "Yes." But as she left the chamber, walking down the long, echoing hall, her fingers twitched toward the hilt of her dagger, not with purpose, but hesitation. She had always known the cost of justice, but she was beginning to wonder if she'd become something else entirely, something not even her father would have recognized. The corridors of the Red Keep were quieter now, too quiet. What had once been the heart of Westeros, bustling with lords and whispers and servants and secrets, now echoed with the sound of boots and unsaid fear. The golden lions were gone, their banners torn down, replaced by a sea of black and red. The Targaryen sigil glared from every corner like a warning. The people didn't bow anymore, they ducked. Arya walked through the halls with her hood down. She didn't hide here. She didn't need to. The guards moved aside when they saw her, not out of respect, but because they knew what she was. She didn't carry a sword at her hip, not openly. But they all knew she could kill them before they blinked. It was the way she walked, quiet, measured, Like someone who had nothing left to prove, she reached Tyrion's cell. Two Unsullied stood at the door, their spears crossed. They looked at her without speaking, but they knew why she was there. Everyone knew. Arya waited. "Open it," she said flatly. The Unsullied hesitated for only a moment before stepping aside. The heavy door groaned open, and the scent of damp stone and stale air drifted out. Tyrion was sitting on the ground, his back against the wall, his hands bound. He looked up slowly, and for a moment, there was no fear in his eyes. Just tiredness, exhaustion. "Ah," he said, his voice dry. "The wolf comes to finish what the dragon began." Arya said nothing as she stepped inside. The door shut behind her. The cell was dim, lit by a single torch. Shadows danced along the walls, stretching and bending like memories. Tyrion tilted his head. "So tell me, girl, what did I do that was worse than burning a city full of innocents?" "You betrayed her," Arya said, voice steady. Tyrion gave a bitter smile. "And you serve her now, after what she did?" Arya didn't answer. She sat down across from him, folding her legs like she used to when training with the waif. Every move precise, controlled. "I've served no one," she sighed. "Only justice." Tyrion scoffed. "Justice? Is that what they call murder now?" She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You knew what would happen when you freed Jaime. I hoped he could reason with her, save the city, save her." "You hoped wrong." "Yes," Tyrion admitted quietly, "I did." The silence between them stretched. Arya's fingers toyed with the edge of her sleeve, brushing the hidden hilt of her dagger beneath the cloth. "You're not here to talk," Tyrion said. "You're here because she wants me dead. And you make people disappear, like it never happened." Arya said nothing. He leaned forward slightly. "How many, Arya?" She blinked. "How many people have you killed for her?" She looked away. "You don't have to say it." "I know that look. I wore it once, when I thought I was saving the world by sacrificing a few. The trouble is, it's never just a few, is it?" He sighed. "She'll keep burning cities, you know, or villages. Or people who write the wrong words on walls. You think you're cleaning up the mess, but you're just hiding the bodies." Arya stood. Her heart was beating louder than she wanted it to. Her fingers closed around the dagger's hilt under her cloak. "Did you love her?" she asked suddenly. Tyrion blinked, startled. "No, not in the way Jon did. I admired her, believed in her. Until she gave the order. Until I watched the fire fall." Arya took a step forward. Her eyes were hard now, her voice low. "You betrayed the crown. You freed your brother. You tried to save Cersei Lannister." "She was still my sister," Tyrion said simply. "And my mistake cost me everything. But if you're going to kill me, at least know this, whatever you think you're doing for Daenerys, it's not justice. It's survival, and it won't last." Arya's blade was halfway out. She stared at him, at the man who had once stood beside her brother, at the dwarf who'd outlived kings and queens, lies and wars. He had lied, schemed, drunk, betrayed, but also saved lives when he could. He had tried. She remembered that dot, and in her chest, a tightness formed. She slid the blade back. "You're not the enemy," she said quietly. Tyrion looked up at her, stunned. "What are you doing?" Arya turned, already at the door. "I'm making a choice." She whispered dot, and for the first time since she put on the black cloak, she wasn't sure who that choice would cost more, Daenerys or herself. The air outside Tyrion's cell felt colder now, even though the stone walls were the same. Arya moved silently through the corridors, but this time it wasn't with the confidence of a predator. It was something else, something closer. To doubt. Every step echoed louder than it should have, like the keep itself was listening. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. What haunted her now wasn't Tyrion's words. It was the silence that followed them. The stillness inside her. The part that hadn't argued, hadn't protested, hadn't even felt anger. That was the part that scared her. She had spared him. And that meant she had disobeyed Daenerys. She made her way to the royal wing, where firelight bled through every tapestry. At the far end of the hall stood Daenerys, cloaked in black and red, staring out over the city from the same balcony where her father had once stood. The Iron Throne was behind her, twisted and cruel, still standing among the rubble like a symbol of everything that refused to die. Arya stopped a few paces behind her. "You were gone long," Daenerys said without turning around. Arya didn't answer. "I asked you for something simple," the queen continued, her voice soft but sharp. "You've never hesitated before." "I needed time," Arya said. Now Daenerys turned. Her eyes, still rimmed with grief and vengeance, settled on Arya like a blade against skin. "Time? You've killed faster for less." Arya met her gaze. "He's not a threat." Daenerys took a step closer. "He betrayed me." Arya didn't flinch. "He's broken, alone. Killing him now doesn't fix what's already been done." There it was. The defiance laid bare. Daenerys' expression didn't change, but something cold shimmered in her eyes. "You sound like Jon." Arya's jaw tightened. "He spoke of mercy too," Daenerys said, her voice quieter now, almost wistful. "He thought kindness could rebuild the world. But you know better. You've seen what I've seen. You've lived through the same lies." "I have," Arya agreed, voice low. "But mercy isn't weakness. Weakness, it is when you sit on a throne of ash," Daenerys snapped. "It is when you have enemies in every corner waiting for a single mistake." Arya took a breath. "You don't need to kill everyone who disagrees with you, don't I?" the queen asked, stepping forward, voice rising. "Wasn't that what your list was? A reckoning? Didn't you cross names off with the same fire I use now?" Arya said nothing, because the truth was yes, she had. And sometimes it had felt right, even righteous. But the difference was, she had never called herself a queen. She had never claimed to save the world. "You chose me," Daenerys said. Softer now. "You stood in the ash and looked into my eyes, and you didn't strike. You saw the future I was offering." Arya's voice was a whisper now. "I thought I did." Daenerys stepped closer still, her face inches from Arya's. "You don't get to hesitate," she whispered. "Not now. Not after everything we've burned through together." Arya's breath was shallow. And then Daenerys said it. "Kill him. Or I will have someone else kill you." The words didn't shake. They didn't sound like a threat. They were a decree. Arya's mind went still. For the first time in years, she felt something sharp twist inside her. Not fear, but clarity. This was no longer about justice. This was control. This was tyranny with a pretty face and a scorched crown. "I served because I believed in you," Arya said, barely breathing the words. "Then prove it," Daenerys whispered. "Or walk away and become nothing again." Arya didn't reply. She turned and walked away, each step feeling heavier than the last. She didn't head back to the dungeons. She didn't leave the Red Keep. Instead, she found Jon. He was in his quarters, still wearing his black leathers, a man displaced in a world that no longer made sense. He looked up when Arya entered, and his face softened not in relief, but worry. "Arya? I need you to listen," she said, closing the door behind her. "There's no more time." She gave the order. "If I don't kill Tyrion, you kill me." Jon stood, eyes narrowing. "You didn't do it?" Arya shook her head. "I couldn't. And now I think I'm finally seeing her the way you do." Jon looked away, jaw clenched. "She's not mad," Arya said. "Not in the way her father was. She's worse. Because she believes she's right. Every death, every fire, every child burned, she thinks it's a sacrifice the world needs." Jon sat down heavily. "What do we do?" he asked. Arya's answer came slowly but firmly. "We end it." The candlelight flickered in Jon's chambers, casting long shadows across his face as Arya's words sank in. The silence between them was thick with everything they weren't saying. That Daenerys was too far gone. That her vision of justice had turned into judgment. That the queen they had followed was now a danger to everyone still breathing. Jon stood. Slowly, his hand resting on the pommel of his sword, but he didn't draw it. "You're sure about this?" he asked, eyes fixed on his sister. Arya nodded, her voice cold and clear. "She's not going to stop. If I kill Tyrion, it's just another name. Next time, it'll be you. Then Sansa, then everyone who doesn't kneel." Jon didn't argue. He couldn't. Somewhere deep down, he'd known it would come to this. He had tried to look away, tried to justify her fury, her grief. But now there was no more pretending. Daenerys hadn't just conquered a kingdom. She had crushed it beneath her dragon's fire and called it salvation. "We have no army," Jon said. "No allies left," Arya shook her head. "We don't need an army, just a blade." Jon hesitated. "You want me to kill her?" "I want us to end her," Arya said. "Together." He turned away, staring out the narrow window. Snow was falling again, mixing with the ash that never seemed to stop, drifting down from the ruins. He thought of Sam, of Ghost, of the Watch, of a world that used to make sense, even if it was cruel. "She loved me," Jon said quietly. Arya walked closer. "And you wanted to love her. But that doesn't make her right." He didn't reply. "You're not the boy you were at Winterfell," Arya continued. "You've seen what power does. And she's burning anyone who questions it, even people like me." He turned, eyes full of conflict. "I don't want to kill her," Arya nodded. "I didn't want to kill Tyrion." They stood in silence again, the weight of it too heavy to move through. Then Arya stepped forward and did something she hadn't done in years. She reached out and took Jon's hand. "If we wait, more will die," she said. "You know it." He looked down at her hand, then back into her eyes. For a moment, he saw the girl who used to chase cats and stick her tongue out at Sansa. But now she was steel. So was he nodded once. "All right." They planned quickly. The queen rarely left the throne room now. Her days were spent there, basking in power, conferring with Grey Worm, demanding fealty from the lords who remained. Her guards were many, but none of them feared Arya. That was the advantage. They assumed she was still Daenerys' shadow, not her ghost. Jon would distract Daenerys, keep her talking. Arya would come from the side entrance near the throne, the same spot where Jaime Lannister had once stood behind the Mad King. Jon hated the idea, not because he didn't trust Arya, but because it felt too much like the past, repeating itself. And in some twisted way, he still wanted to believe Daenerys could change, that she would see what she was becoming and turn away from it. But deep down, he already knew. The next morning, Arya moved through the halls of the Red Keep with the calm of a seasoned assassin. Her blade, needle, was gone. In its place was a dagger forged in Valyrian steel, one she'd taken from Littlefinger after he fell. It felt right in her hand. It felt final. She passed Grey Worm in the corridor. He looked at her briefly, then nodded. No suspicion, no alarm, she nodded back, hiding the pulse in her throat. Jon was already inside. The great doors of the throne room were shut behind him. The Iron Throne loomed at the far end, Daenerys seated upon it, a solitary figure draped in shadows and firelight. Drogon slept outside, coiled like a mountain of muscle and smoke. Jon walked slowly, his hands empty, his expression unreadable. Daenerys smiled when she saw him. "You came back." He stopped a few feet from the throne. "We need to talk." Outside, Arya slipped through the side door, the one hidden behind a half-broken pillar. Her feet didn't make a sound. The dagger gleamed once in the dim light, then vanished beneath her sleeve. From the throne, Daenerys stood and stepped toward Jon. "We can build it together," she said. A better world, you and me. Jon looked into her eyes. He saw the fire still burning there. Not just ambition, but belief. She really thought she was the hero, the savior, the one who would break the wheel. You're burning the world to build it, Jon said. Daenerys tilted her head. Then let it burn. That was when Arya stepped from the shadows. Her blade was in her hand. Daenerys turned just as Jon moved forward, grabbing her arms. Arya! But it was too late. The dagger was already rising. The world slowed in that moment. Jon's hands gripped Daenerys' arms, not to stop her, not to save her, but to hold her steady. His face was so twisted in anguish, not anger. He didn't look away. He couldn't, because if this was the end, then he had to carry it. All of it. Daenerys' eyes widened as Arya emerged from the shadows, the blade already halfway through the air. Her lips parted, not in fear, but in betrayal. She tried to speak, to say something, but the words never made it out. The dagger slid into her chest, clean and sharp, just under the breastbone, straight to the heart. Daenerys gasped, a thin sound, like air escaping a broken flute. Her legs gave out. Jon caught her, lowering her slowly to the floor. Her silver hair fanned around her like a halo, her lips trembling, but her eyes locked onto Arya's. Arya stood over her, cold, still. She didn't gloat. She didn't cry. She just watched as the light drained from the woman who thought herself a god. Daenerys' lips moved once more. Arya leaned in. "Dracarys," she whispered, but Drogon didn't come. Only silence answered her dying breath. Outside, the keep held its breath. Then the scream came, one long, endless howl from the sky. Drogon's cry cracked across the heavens as the great beast sensed her death. His wings stretched out, massive and black against the gray sky, and he landed hard beside the throne room, shaking the earth beneath him. Arya backed away. Jon stood, still over Daenerys' lifeless body, his face blank with pain. Drogon shoved his head through the broken wall and saw his mother. For a moment, he stared at Jon. Fire burned behind his eyes, ancient and full of rage. Arya tensed, her fingers twitching toward the dagger still slick in her hand. But Drogon didn't attack. He didn't scorch Jon. He didn't destroy Arya. Instead, he released a thunderous roar and turned toward the Iron Throne. With one great breath, he unleashed fire, not at them, but at the throne itself. The molten stream hit the iron, melting it into slag and smoke. The twisted swords of 1,000 enemies turned to glowing rivers of ruin. The throne was gone. Then Drogon took her body in his claws, gentle, almost like a child cradling its mother, and rose into the air with one last mournful scream. They watched as he disappeared. Over the horizon, Daenerys Targaryen vanishing into the clouds with nothing left behind. Arya and Jon remained in the throne room, both of them silent. Smoke hung in the air like judgment. It was done. The war was over, but the consequences had only just begun. The next morning, Grey Worm stood at the gates of the Red Keep, flanked by Unsullied. His face was stone. When he learned Daenerys was dead, he didn't shout. He didn't lash out. He simply ordered Jon arrested. Arya watched from the shadows as her brother was taken into custody. He didn't resist. He didn't speak. He just met her eyes for one moment and nodded once. She didn't move to stop them. She couldn't. Because the truth was, Daenerys had many loyal followers left. The world wouldn't instantly thank them for what they had done. It would take time, negotiations, lies. Justice always came with a cost. Arya disappeared after that. Not gone but hidden, like she had always been. The stories would spread quickly. That the Dragon Queen had died mysteriously. That Jon Snow had turned himself in. That the Iron Throne was no more. Sansa came down from the north to negotiate with what was left of the council. Bran was named king, not because anyone truly wanted it, but because no one else could agree on anything else. Jon was exiled to the Night's Watch again. But Arya, Arya did not return north, that she did not wait for forgiveness or praise or glory, that she took a ship west, beyond the maps. Somewhere new, somewhere clean, not to run, not to escape, but to find herself again, because for all the names she had known. 1. Arya Stark, Queen's Justice, killer of tyrants. There was still one she didn't understand, who she was. Without vengeance, the sea was quiet most days. Arya stood at the bow of the ship, wind cutting through her cloak, her eyes on the endless blue ahead. No land in sight, no ravens, no names. Just the creaking wood beneath her boots and the steady crash of waves that didn't care what she had done. She hadn't spoken much since the day she left Westeros behind. The crew sell-sails and outcasts mostly kept their distance. They respected silence when it came with a stare like hers. At night, they told stories below deck, laughing and drinking and pretending the world hadn't ended behind them. Arya didn't laugh, didn't drink. She sharpened her blade, not because she expected danger, because she didn't know who she was without it. Days passed, then weeks. The sky never changed much, always a bruised shade of gray or pale blue. Sometimes she saw birds. Once, a pod of whales. But no land. No sign of anything. She began to wonder if there was anything west of Westeros, or if it was just endless water until the world fell off the edge like old masters once believed. At night, she dreamed. Not peaceful dreams. Never that. She saw Daenerys' eyes, wide and full of fire. She saw her father's head falling in the square. She heard Catelyn's screams, Robb's blood, the red wedding, faces she wore, faces she killed, names she whispered. Sometimes she saw Jon, standing alone in the snow again, watching her walk away. And he never said a word. She'd wake up gasping, fingers gripping the hilt of her dagger before her eyes were even open. The ship's captain, a grizzled man with no name worth remembering, finally approached her one dawn. "We've been sailing west for 2 months," he said. "If there's land, it's hiding." Arya didn't answer. "You want us to turn back?" She looked at him for a long moment. "Can't go back." He nodded once, not understanding, but not pushing. The next week, a storm hit. Winds howled like dying wolves. The sea threw the ship around like a toy. Arya didn't scream, didn't panic. She tied herself to the mast and stared into the storm, daring it to swallow her. Part of her hoped it would. When the sky finally cleared, 2 men were dead. Another had lost his hand. The sails were shredded, and the ship was limping forward, barely holding together. And then finally land. It wasn't much. A jagged coast, sharp rocks, cliffs so steep the waves exploded against them in bursts of foam. No sign of cities, no lights, no towers or walls. Just wild. Untouched. The crew cheered. Arya didn't, because as they approached, something twisted in her chest. Not fear, something worse. Hope. And she didn't trust hope anymore. They made landfall with 2 rowboats. The air smelled different here, wetter, older. The trees near the shore were black-barked with silver leaves, shimmering even though there was no wind. Arya stepped off the boat and let her boots sink into the strange soil. It felt clean. She didn't know what she expected to find: monsters, gods, more death. But what she found was silence, untouched wilderness. No roads, no voices, just a place unclaimed. They camped that night near the tree line. The others were already planning splitting off, settling, mapping. Arya slipped away while they argued over who would build what and where. She moved through the forest like a shadow. No wolves, no people, just the sound of her breath and the occasional rustle of something unseen. After hours, she found it. A stone circle, old, covered in moss. No markings. She didn't know who built it, but she sat inside it, cross-legged, eyes closed. And for the first time since Winterfell, she let herself speak, not to anyone, just into the wind. "I thought killing her would feel like saving the world," she whispered. But it didn't. It felt like every other name. The wind moved through the trees, whispering back nothing. Arya touched the hilt of her dagger. I wanted to be someone after all of it. Not a ghost, not death. Just someone. The silence welcomed her. She sat there until night, and when she stood, something inside her was lighter. Not healed, but open. She didn't know if this place had gods, or ghosts, or anything else, but she knew this much. She was no longer Arya Stark, Queen's Justice. Not a killer, not a faceless girl. She was someone, and this was the beginning of something new. The land spoke in quiet ways, not with words, not even in the whispers of wind through the trees, but in the way the ground held her steps, soft and spongy like it. Remembered every footprint, and how the birds paused when she moved past. How the trees seemed to lean in, listening, watching. Arya ventured deeper into the wild. She left the camp behind without warning. The other settlers, drunk on discovery, didn't notice. They had their own plans, clearing trees, building shelters, planting flags on places they didn't yet understand. But Arya didn't want to claim this land. She wanted to know it. The Purya didn't want to claim this land. Arya didn't want to claim this land. Forest grew stranger the further she walked. The bark of the trees thickened, smooth like skin and dark as obsidian. Their silver leaves glimmered even in the shade. Every so often, she passed clear pools of water, perfectly still. Too still. Like mirrors that didn't reflect her right. She didn't trust mirrors. Not after the house of black and white. On the third day, she saw something move. It wasn't human. It wasn't an animal either. It stood between the trees. Half shadow, half light. Tall, thin, still. She couldn't see a face, only a shape like the echo of a person. Watching her, she reached for her blade. The thing didn't move. She blinked, and it was gone. Her fingers tightened around the hilt. Her breath was steady, but her skin crawled. Later, she found markings, carvings in stone, hidden under moss. Symbols she didn't recognize, old and curling like vines. One of them looked like an eye. Another a wolf. That night, she didn't sleep. The forest didn't either. On the fifth day, she found the village. It wasn't made by the settlers. It was far too old. The wood was gray with age, the huts hollowed out by time and moss. Vines clung to crumbling stone walls. Bones littered the ground, not human. At least not fully, too long, too twisted. She moved slowly through the ruins, blade drawn. There were no signs of a struggle. No fire, no arrows or blades. Just absence, like the people had vanished into the trees, or become them. In the center of the village stood a statue. 7 feet tall, cracked and leaning. It showed a woman with no face, her arms stretched outward, her hands holding nothing. Arya stared at it for a long time. A god? A warning? She couldn't tell. That night, as she camped beside the ruined village, she heard them. Voices. Not loud. Not close, but around her. Children laughing, men whispering. A woman humming a song she didn't know. She stood and turned slowly, her blade flashing in the fireht. No one was there. The voices stopped. Only the trees remained. By the 7th day, the forest began to change again. The air grew colder, though the sun still hung high. The ground turned damp, black mud swallowing her boots. The trees now leaned toward each other, forming narrow tunnels like rib cages. Every step sounded louder, as if something below was listening. Arya felt it in her bones. She was not alone. She didn't see the creature until it moved. It darted between the trees, fast, hunched low like a crawling thing. No face, no sound. Just the brush of leaves and the sudden stillness of birds. She didn't run. She waited. And when it stepped into view, her heart didn't race. It stopped. It had no eyes, no mouth. Its body was thin, gray, almost see-through like smoke. It tilted its head like a dog sniffing the air. sensing her but not seeing. Arya stood perfectly still. It stepped forward. Slow. Testing. She raised her dagger. And then it spoke, not with sound. Not with lips, but in her mind. No name, it said. No place. No time. Just ash. Arya didn't flinch. What are you? The thing tilted its head again. Then it repeated, ash. It reached toward her. And suddenly, she was somewhere else. Winterfell. Her father alive. Bran laughing. Needle in her hand for the first time. Then the red wedding. Then Bravos. Faces melting. Names whispered. Blood. Then Daenerys on her knees, staring up at her. Jon. Turning away. She gasped, choking on it, and the world snapped back. The creature was gone. The forest was silent again. But the fire inside her, it was burning brighter than before. Arya dropped to her knees, heart hammering. Whatever this land was, it didn't care for thrones or kings or dragons. It had its own gods, its own shadows, and they had seen her, touched her, and maybe they liked her, or maybe they wanted her to become something else entirely. The dawn broke slow and gray, as if the sky itself were unsure whether to rise again. Arya knelt at the edge of a black stream, its waters still as glass. Her reflection rippled, warping her face, showing flickers of other versions of herself, bloody, masked, faceless. She didn't blink. She just watched, waiting to see which one remained. When the ripples stilled, none of them did. Behind her, the forest breathed. Not in the way animals breathe, with lungs and sound, but in the way old things do. Patient, constant, a rhythm she could feel in her bones now, like a second heartbeat. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. She didn't feel hunger. She hadn't slept in longer, but her mind was sharper than ever, knife-sharp, quiet, honed. Something had changed inside her since the creature's touch. Not broken, not damaged, just opened, like a door she hadn't known was there had creaked open. And the wind blowing through it carried every memory she had buried. She heard her father's voice. The man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. And her own, a girl has no name. And Daenerys, then let it burn. The voices weren't haunting her. They were gathering, like witnesses. She wandered deeper into the woods without marking her trail. She didn't need to. This place wasn't a map, it was a test. Eventually, the trees gave way to a clearing, unlike anything she'd seen. It was a circle of ancient stone, like a weirwood grove, but darker, stranger. The stones were tall and crooked, covered in black moss and strange etchings. In the center stood a single tree, leafless, white as bone, with roots that stretched above the ground like fingers. At its base, something waited. A figure. Not quite man. Not quite shadow. It wore a cloak of bark and mist. Its face, there was none. Just a smooth surface like polished obsidian. When it turned toward her, Arya felt every scar on her body ache at once. She stepped forward. No fear. No blade drawn. She was beyond fear now. The figure spoke not aloud, but into her. You wear death like a cloak, but it does not belong to you. She stared back. I earned it. You borrowed it. The names, the faces, the justice, all of it. Borrowed. Arya's hand moved to her dagger, not to draw it, not to feel it. To remember. Then tell me, she said. Who am I now? The figure turned its head. No one. Arya smirked. I've heard that before. You came here to run. But this land has no roads. She stepped closer. The air around the creature shimmered, thick with energy, not heat or cold, but memory, power, old as the world. I didn't come to run, she said. I came because I killed a queen, and I didn't know if it was right. The thing said nothing. Arya's voice dropped. I need to know if I'm still me. The forest held its breath, and the figure lifted its hand. A gesture, not of command, but invitation. Arya didn't hesitate. She stepped forward. And the world fell away. It wasn't death. It was before. She saw visions again, flashes, pieces. Man with a stag's crown, falling to boar tusks. A girl in green pushed from a tower. A wolf with red eyes running through snow. Bran sitting beneath a tree, his eyes white and empty. But then things she hadn't seen. A vast land, endless and untouched. Creatures with silver eyes and no mouths. Fire that sang instead of burned. A sea of stars falling into forests. And through it all, she walked. Unafraid. She was still Arya Stark, but now she was more. She woke, gasping. On the forest floor. Alone. The figure was gone. But something had changed. Her heartbeat was slower. Her breath deeper. Her eyes sharper. She looked down at her hands. They didn't tremble. The dagger at her belt glowed faintly black now, not silver. Marked with strange runes that hadn't been there before. Not magic. Memory. The forest had accepted her. Not as a conqueror, not as a queen, but as something else. Its balance. Its justice. Its blade in the dark. When Arya returned to the ruins of the old village, the settlers stared at her. Something about her was different. They couldn't say what. She didn't explain. She didn't need to. They started calling her something else. Not Arya. Not Lady Stark. Just the Watcher. She never stayed in one place long. She wandered the wild paths, silent as breath. Protecting those who respected the land. And ending those who came with fire in their eyes. She didn't keep a list anymore. The forest whispered the names to her now, and she listened. Because death still had work to do. But now, it had purpose. And her name was no longer borrowed. It was earned.